Hello and welcome to What's the Tea in L&E. I'm Emily.
And I'm Leah.
We are management side employment attorneys with Woods Rogers. Leah, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about jiggling at work.
It's not what it sounds like.
No, it's not. It is when employees, generally remote working employees, purchase little devices that keep their mouse moving on a pad in different directions, and sometimes little devices that will click the keyboard at random times so that employees can fake work productivity.
Clever, but problematic. How common is this?
Well, one survey looked at over 1 million different employees and found that 8% of them were faking work productivity with these devices.
Wow.
8%, and that's probably low.
And I think realistically that's probably low. It's probably at least 1 in 10.
So, Emily, can an employer monitor an employee's remote use? What is an employer supposed to do in this situation?
Yeah, well, an employer has broad latitude in the U.S. to monitor employees, and surveillance software, use of surveillance software is very common. What they do need to do as an employer is give a very explicit disclaimer so that employees know that at any given moment you are or could be monitoring their computer.
And I'm really glad that you put the caveat in about in the U.S. Because outside of the U.S., especially in Europe, there are much stricter laws, and it's much harder for an employer to monitor this. So yes, an employer can use software that monitors an employee's computer usage. They have to have that express disclaimer, and you generally want an employee to kind of sign off on that as an acknowledgement that they understand that they could be monitored at any time. Now, Emily, what are some backdraws to monitoring employees' usage?
Yeah, I think, we've talked about before, over surveillance can create like a big brother atmosphere, and poor morale and employees feeling like there's a lack of trust there. That can really hurt productivity, really hurt employee retention. So I would say as a practical matter, keep an eye on people's responsiveness and their overall output. Are they doing their job? And if there's some poor performance, then maybe take a look at their computer use.
Yeah, and maybe the first step from a disciplinary standpoint is not necessarily termination, but maybe revoking that work from home ability, right? So that you can monitor them and letting them know you're going to be monitoring those keystrokes a lot closer. The other thing too is, we did have one client indicate that they use some sort of software and that it checks for idle time. And that if an employee has over 20% of idle time, there's the possibility that they could deduct from an employee's pay. The dangers there are that you've got to be careful about whether or not the employee is non-exempt, exempt. It's also going to be really hard to enforce that because an employee is going to be able to say, oh, I was thinking about something, or I printed something off, I was reading it, I was on the phone with a coworker. So don't just rely on that. We wouldn't recommend deducting pay in these types of situations. But if you have concerns, talk to an employee. Tell them you don't trust them. Tell them you have concerns about their computer usage, their responsiveness, and try to address it a different way.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for being here with us for another What's the Tea, and we'll talk to you again soon.